Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transformational Power of Grant Writing. My name is Claire Crimando. I am just going to share my screen with everyone real quick. Okay. All right, I am a certified social worker. I do have a background in grant writing. I worked for one of the longest standing and most prolific grant writing firms in the Garden State, Bruno Associates, for a few years. Today, we are just going to go over Grant Writing 101 and everything that I wish I knew starting out in grant writing, as it's so essential in the nonprofit world, local governments, first responders, housing authorities, boards of education. So many of us need grants. Since this is not a formal seminar, I had originally recorded this with NASW New Jersey. If you just want to leave comments below or wherever this is posted, what do you hope to get out of this discussion today? On our agenda, we have my introduction and my background. We're going to talk a little bit about my grant writing experience and the type of clients and grants that I have experience with, the qualities of a successful grant writer, the economy of words, structure of proposals or the anatomy of a proposal, mission alignment, understanding funder expectations, NOFOs, NOFAs, RFPs, and solicitations. If you don't know what any of those are, we will be getting into them in a little while. Then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, online portals, what's a DUNS number, what are the expected attachments that you're going to have to submit with your grant application, grant writing versus grant management, two different worlds, ethical dilemmas, political infrastructure, types of grant writing employment, advantages and salary expectations, the grant cycle, and an open forum, which will be in the form of comments. So my background, like I said, I worked for, in my opinion, the best grant writing firm in New Jersey. And my client experience was with primarily local governments and first responders, housing authorities, boards of education, higher education, some universities, and then personal consulting work with nonprofits and faith-based institutions or churches. For example, I helped out the Haitian community in New Jersey during the Census Count 2020 to help the faith community within the Essex County area get out the count, as you know, it was so important to get various ethnic and minority communities to be counted and to trust the census process and to make that more accessible. I worked with some of the biggest housing authorities in the state, like Camden Housing Authority, local governments all across the state, from Bergen County all the way down to Ocean County. And we have clients that really ran the gamut, boards of education, Patterson Board of Education, a lot of different cities in the state, and big boards. But I actually really loved working just with the local governments and the first responders. Those were my favorite grants personally to do. Just love the people that I worked with. And you can see my bio over there on the right. Another poll, form of comments. Let me know your experience in the comments. Have you never worked on a grant? Are you a beginner? You've done some stuff here and there. You've seen grants. You have some experience, intermediate, or you're a professional. And if you have worked on grants, I'd love to know which grant programs you've worked on or under. Okay, qualities of a successful grant writer. You have to be organized, and you have to have the ability to multitask, right? You're often going to be managing competing deadlines and competing priorities. So you need to make sure that you have an organization system, both physically and on your computer, because again, grants are something that gets audited in the future. Any funding is subject to audit. So you're going to want to keep a paper trail very organized for every client, every grant program, keep checklists, keep calendars. There's a lot of ways to do that, but make sure you're organized. You have to be an organized person. You have to have the ability to multitask. Oftentimes, because even the grant writing process themselves, even if you're only working on one proposal, it might be all over the place. You might be, having to jump from the proposal section to the budget narrative to evaluation, and it's not necessarily a step 1, 2, 3. And in that order, you're going to be jumping around a lot of times because you need different parts. You need to collaborate with different people, different sections of an organization or a government. You need to get data from other organizations, letters of support, things of that nature. You have to be deadline oriented. Grants, for the most part, other than those that are offered on a rolling basis and are open throughout the year, most have strict deadlines that are that you must be very timely for. Detail oriented. You also have to really be detailed, especially when you're in the program planning phase. The grantor is going to want to know specifically your capacity to run this program that you're proposing. Do you have access to all the data and all the evaluation tools that you're claiming you're going to evaluate your program with? Reading skills. In order to be a good writer, you actually have to be a really good reader, and you have to be well read, so that you can, be as detailed as you can, but also be as concise as you can. You have to be a strong communicator. Communication is key in the grant writing world because you are always talking to so many different people, whether it be the funder or whether it be your clients or your team trying to get attachments together or build that program, or you're engaging with the community or your stakeholders in order to get letters of support or other data needed. A lot of times you're going to need to have partnerships shown in the grant application, and you're going to have to build those partnerships, pitch to your potential partners, and talk about why you should go for this funding together as partners. And persistence. There are not straightforward wins all the time in grant writing. It's a lot of up and down. You're not going to win every grant that you apply for. Plain and simple. Even if you're a seasoned grant writer, there's so much competition out there. There's so many nonprofits doing great work, or there's simply communities with more need. So try your best, but don't let it get you down, and don't lose hope. Be persistent, be resilient when it comes to grant writing. Did you know, this is a fun fact, that almost every corporation has a grant foundation, such as Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, pretty much any corporation that you can think of or franchise. If you Google them with grant next to it, I'm sure that you will actually find some sort of a foundation that's attached to that entity that has a grant program. So the nitty gritty, expected attachments, online portals, DUNS number, sam.gov. So what are the expected attachments that are often asked for when you're submitting a grant? One, if you are a nonprofit, or if the grant maker is seeking applications from nonprofits, you're going to need your 501c3 IRS determination letter. All executive directors should have that on file. It should be easily accessible within your nonprofit. If you're the grant writer, you should go to the executive director and they should have that on hand. Letters of support. Letters of support, they can come from, again, community members, stakeholders. It's going to depend on the grant maker. They will often suggest who you need letters of support from. They may just be an additional bonus point for the application, and sometimes you will need letters of support, say, from a planning or zoning board, an environmental commission, depending on what type of grant you're going for. I know with local government grants, whether they be state, federal, or county, letters of support are often required, and then they mandate who they have to come from. And then getting, resident approval, stuff like that. If you're working with a school, you want to get parents on board, or different school groups, etc. You're also going to often need a most recent year W-5 or W-4 form. Again, your executive director, or whoever does the budgeting at your organization, school or local government, the CFO should have that information. most recent year audit. Honestly, a lot of this information should be publicly available on your website or at least on your GuideStar profile. And honestly, it becomes easier when you do just keep an up-to-date public record. I know for local governments, they have to publish their audits online for the most recent year, as well as their adopted budget, which is the next attachment that I discussed. So you're going to need your most recent year audit sometimes, and sometimes you will also need your most recent year's adopted budget. And if it's a multi-page budget, I know for municipalities, right, it's sometimes upwards of 200 or 300 pages. I always edit the PDF, and at the top, I just highlight such and such an area is talked about on, this page or these sequence of pages, just so you want to make it as easy for the funder as possible to get through your grant application, and especially just check off, the attachments and make sure everything is in order. So what is grants.gov? Grants.gov is the official site to find federal grants, right? Federal grants, federal money coming from the federal government. So we're talking about Department of Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. All those types of grants are found on grants.gov, and you can just create an account for free. And if you go to grants.gov and just type it in your search bar, there's a little search bar in the top right corner, and you can just Google any type of grant, and you can look at forecasted, closed, and open grants. So that's great for federal money. SAM.gov. SAM.gov stands for the System for Award Management. You're going to want to register your entity if you're a nonprofit or a local government. So you're going to need your EIN or tax identification number and your DUNS number, which is called the Data Universal Numbering System. With SAM.gov, you do have to update your registration once a year. That's a requirement. And essentially what SAM.gov does is that's another federal entity, and it contains your organization's national clearinghouse and banking information in order to pay you those federal grants. So if you're applying for a federal grant, you can't do that without SAM.gov, because that's the way that the federal government is going to track and send you that money. And DUNS numbers is exactly how they do that. So you would think, well, why do I need to submit my, a DUNS number or register for this DUNS number if I already have a tax ID number that I'm submitting to the grant? Well, it's just another way that the federal government is going to track where those funds are going. And that's the number that you need to get assigned to you. So it's in another unique number. It's a 9-character number that is used to identify your organization. And I will say that the federal government is trying to find ways to make this grant process more secure and make your entity more easily identifiable. So that's all being worked out right now. I know they're coming out with unique entity identifiers and stuff like that. So stay tuned when you're in the federal grants world. It's ever changing, but once you kind of get these first steps out of the way, it's easy. If you're in New Jersey, as I am local to New Jersey, I'm going to talk about the NJ vendor ID number. Some grants, such as, there was a lot of environmental money that came out of the Volkswagen settlement fund here. You need to get that number on njstart.com. If your CFO does not have it, or your organization does not, or local government does not know what it is, you need to get it on njstart.com. IDIS, I'm IDIS certified. It's a bit of a nightmare. It's another federal online portal. It stands for the Integrated Disbursement and Information System. So any grant writer working on CDBG grants, and sometimes HUD or in HEROES, you're going to have to get IDIS certified. Oftentimes there's a lot of legal regulations with who can work in these grant systems, but they're very complex, and I would definitely recommend paying for training or going through the training through IDIS, because it's very complex. Hopefully they can find a way to make it more user-friendly in the future. So what is the economy of words? This is something my old coworker who trained me in grant writing had taught me about a little bit, but it's essentially talking about, it's really a grant writer term, but it's really referring to the fact that you need to be detailed and concise at the same time. A lot of grants, now that they're all online for the most part, are going to require character limits. So you're going to want to remove junk words. You're going to want to proofread a lot and have a proofreader. Use a thesaurus. I love thesaurus.com. When I'm proofreading out loud and I notice I'm using a word too much, I'll just plug it in right into thesaurus.com and I will hopefully come up with a better way to say what I'm trying to say. Read aloud your proposal to catch mistakes. Sometimes I'll read something and because I'm staring at a screen for too long, I won't catch the mistakes that I made when I was just proofreading silently. Be concise, like I said. Be explicit in your program plan and mission alignment. And, you're going to want to make sure that your mission alignment literally is lining up with the funder's mission alignment. Sometimes these grant proposals are run through algorithms online. And if you're not hitting the keywords in your proposal or different sections, they're going to reject you before they even read your grant proposal. So a lot of times what I like to do as a little hint is take keywords and phrases directly from the NOFO and throw them in your proposal places and manipulate those sentences that are in the notice of funding opportunity or solicitation or RFP. So the anatomy or the structure of a proposal. Not all grants or proposals are going to require the same things, but this is a general skeleton of what you can expect. So especially if it is a email submittal grant or paper, which is rare, you're going to want a cover letter, right? So you're going to want to directly address the funder, CEO, or if you could find out who the application reviewer is, you're going to often have an abstract or overview, which you have to write, and that's going to be very detail oriented. Then you're going to get into the real writing sections, which start with the proposal narrative, which really outline what you're trying to do and your program, why you're the best candidate for this money. Past successes. Have you gotten grants before? Have you worked with this funder before? What similar programs have you implemented? What was your success rate? What did you learn from it? Goals. If you're a social worker or in business, you know what a SMART goal is. It means specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, or some variation of that. But you're going to want to have SMART goals. The goals, objectives, timeline, and sometimes milestone section of the grant is personally one of my least favorites, but it is a very important section. And again, sometimes, especially federal grants, they will have in the NOFO what their goals are and examples, and I usually just base mine off of those. But that's where you're going to want to talk about very specific goals, right? And you're going to want to have a timeline attached to that goal. When is it going to get accomplished? How is it going to get accomplished? Is it realistic? Make sure that your agency or organization or school board or local government is involved in the planning so that you can talk about, is this a realistic plan? Sometimes as a grant writer, especially for clients, we'll say, hey, want to apply for this grant? Okay, what do you want to do with it? What are the results you want? They said, I was hoping No. It's a collaborative process. And especially if you're just a grant writer, not functioning within an organization itself, like at a nonprofit, I think that's ideal. But if you're just working with clients, they need to have be within the process with you for sure. Objectives and timeline, take the timeline from the NOFO or the notice of funding opportunity. It's going to say this program start date and the program end date. And that's what you're going to know that you need to keep your programming within there. And sometimes they'll have certain milestones. Hey, you need this report by this time. And you're going to want to write that into your timeline. Partnerships. A lot of grants now are requiring partnerships with other agencies, other stakeholders. But if you don't have a partnership and it requires one, you're not going to get the grant. So make sure that you're looking at the entire solicitation. I'm going to get into that in a little while, but make sure if it says partnerships, you have agencies in mind that you can partner with or other community organizations, stuff of that nature. Number 9, itemized budget. When you're budgeting for a grant, you're going to want to literally account for everything that is going to go into this program. I'm talking like, oh, we need to write stuff down. All right, well, how much are the pencils? How many pencils do we need? You're going to need to itemize everything. You're going to want to be as thorough as you can because that shows the grant maker or the funder that you've done your research and you know exactly what it's going to take to carry out this grant and this program that you're going to use this money for. Then you're usually going to have a budget narrative. So when you do your itemized budget, that's where it says all the items, and then the budget narrative explains in word form, essentially restates what you have above and kind of ties the pieces together. Hey, we need this many of this for this amount in order to do this. And that's where you're going to explain it all, and perhaps put in what you're going to purchase and when. Number 11, evaluation, and the evaluation section is very important. It's towards the end of the grant, so sometimes people get tired or they're exhausted of the months or weeks that they've spent on this grant application, but don't forget about the evaluation. It's a really important part, and it sometimes encompasses sustainability. So the evaluation is going to say, okay, when you're done with our money, how are you going to measure your results, right? So if you're a board of education or a teacher, are you going to evaluate, the changes in your students' grades? If you're a nonprofit, are you going to track client retention or engagement? How are you going to evaluate your program? What tools are you going to use? Do you have the capacity to do that? Is there someone hired for that? You're going to want to talk about all of that in your evaluation. It's going to ask now too, sustainability after grant funding ends. So you're going to need to talk about, how is this program going to be insured in the future, or is it going to be able to be carried out into the future when this funding ends? If you're applying for other grants or have received other grants, or other funding from other funding streams, this is where you're going to talk about that as well. And the funder will really like to see that, but more oftentimes than not, they're going to want to know that this program will be able to continue. Some grants even require a cost share or match, and a cost share or match sometimes is in kind, which means it can be made up with goods and services that your organization provides or are donated, or time, staff time. However, some have a cash match. So some grantors now, if the grant is say 3 or 5 years, every year the grantor will increase the amount that you as the organization are responsible for. So it's essentially slowly weans you off of the grant funder's money so that you can become self-sustainable within this program or whatever you're implementing. Attachments, as we spoke of earlier, letters of support, organizational documentation, and banking statements, you're going to need to attach those at the end. Administrative requirements, sometimes this is at the very beginning of a grant, sometimes it's at the end, but you're going to need to put in your SAM registration, make sure it's up to date. If it is federal, you're going to take a screenshot of that most times and upload it. You're going to put in your DUNS number, your EIN number, etc. And again, some of this stuff is purely federal, so if you're not working on a federal grant, don't freak out. Assurances, that's when you check off, read the fine print. That's where your grant manager is going to want to come in and say, hey, grant manager, can you handle all this? Sometimes it's going to be you. If you're working for a nonprofit, you're the grant writer and manager. You're going to want to read the fine print, make sure that your organization or you have the capacity to manage this grant. Signatures. Don't leave the signatures till the last minute. Not every grant only requires one signature. Sometimes you need a signature from all of your partners, or a memorandum of understanding, or your CFO, executive director. Sometimes a grant will require multiple people's signatures. Sometimes it even has requirements that it needs to be, printed and hand signed and scanned in. Sometimes you could just docu-sign it, but don't forget about that part, or don't underestimate the signatures piece of it. Excuse my dog in the background, Zoe. Hi. Okay, you found a grant and you want to apply for it. Now what? First, does your organization's mission align with your funder's mission? That is very important. You're going to want to be seeking grants from organizations that have similar priorities and mission statements as yours. Second, are your project goals in line with the grant program goals? So in the grants NOFA, or Notice of Funding Opportunities, it's going to have the goals actually of the grant itself. And then you're going to want to either tailor your program goals that you're trying to design or your outcome to align with those goals. What I love to do too, another hint, look at previous awardees, especially if it's a big foundation, say Kresge Foundation or American Honda Foundation, American Theater Wing. There's so many different foundations out there, but look on their GuideStar or look on their website, and they will often have a list of previous awardees. So say you're like a tiny little high school out in the middle of rural Arkansas, right? And you're looking at the awardees and it's like Public High School of Detroit, New York City, big city schools, or schools that have, 5,000 to 8,000 people graduating and your school has like 200. Don't waste your time and apply for something like that. It's not going to happen. Make sure that if you can't find this information online, call the funder or email the funder, and usually this information is public, or they can provide it to you and ask like, hey, do you have the last round's awardees? And obviously if it is a new grant program, they're not going to have a list, but if they've done grants in the past, ask, who do you guys usually fund? And in the NOFO, they're going to have, eligible applicants, but again, you're going to want to go further than that. Even though you're eligible, are you a likely candidate, whether based on your region, your size, the population you serve, etc. Attend the webinars. A lot of grant makers, for example, I know, New Jersey Historic Trust, a lot of foundations and the federal government, HUD always does webinars surrounding whenever they come out with a new grant or solicitation. They will host a webinar. So make sure that you attend the webinar. And if you can't attend it, usually they're recorded, but make sure you watch that recording, because that's the space where you can ask questions and really hear from the funders themselves and get a way better idea about the solicitation. And I oftentimes read the whole solicitation before I go to the webinar, just so I already know the questions that I want to ask or what I need clarification on. Okay, important. Read the entire notice of funding opportunity / application / solicitation / request for proposals. You should always begin in this order. 1, read the eligibility. Sometimes these NOFOs are 200 plus pages. Not a lot of times, sometimes they're short. It depends on what type of funding you're looking for, but especially with federal, they are long. You want to start with the eligibility section, which Command F should be your best friend if you don't know about that already. If you're looking at a large document in PDF or on Word or whatever it may be, Command F, and that can search for a specific word, eligibility, type it right in there, and you can make sure that you are a good candidate for this grant. If they're only funding nonprofits and you're for profit, you cannot apply. And oftentimes you won't even be able to get through because you're going to need to put your tax ID number in there and upload the IRS determination letter. So read the eligibility first and the abstract. Make sure, the abstract is going to be a few sentences. You're going to get a better idea of the goals that are going to be encapsulated in there. And then read each subsequent page. Once you've determined that you are eligible and this sounds like something you want to do, read every single page, especially when you're just starting out. Read every single page, even if it's a grant that you've done every year. I guarantee that the funder will change the application in some way, shape, or form, or the NOFO year to year. And you're going to want to catch those changes, because when a grant maker can get you, they're going to want to get you. I promise you that. You are stepping into a very competitive world. And in order to be the best competitor, like an athlete, you're going to want to train. And basics of training day is making sure that you know the rules. So you're going to want to read that NOFO every single page. Even with stuff that I had experience with, I'd always read every page. If it was not too long, I'd print it out and take a red pen and my highlighter to it. Contact the grant maker, build those relationships. Before calling or emailing with questions, do make sure that you read the whole NOFO and highlight sections. But if you do have questions after you read the NOFO, oftentimes on the solicitation, we'll have a phone number or contact information, maybe an email or phone number, and you can actually contact them, whether it's your grant maker, grant administrator, or whoever it is at the foundation or the entity. Sometimes they have like hotlines set up depending on how big the grant is, and then they can answer your questions there. So don't hesitate to call. I'm on the phone, half the time of the grant writing process asking questions. And again, develop relationships with your funders. That just makes the grant writing process so much better when you have relationships with funders, especially when you're like, hey, sorry to be annoying, but then, I'm on a texting basis with some people, like some FEMA people and stuff. It's so great when you develop relationships. It makes it so much easier. You're able to ask questions freely. And then, if they like you, then they'll give you some like hints and advice. Sometimes they'll even go over your application with you. So these are the definitions, kind of went over them earlier, but NOFO, NOFA, RFP solicitations. This is what it means when you get the email or you see online, hey, there's a NOFO out. That's a notice of funding opportunity. The notice of funds available or the request for proposal. All this is basically a definition of directions for the grant. That's what it is. It's essentially a few pages or a packet of the grant directions. Okay, NOFOs continued. These acronyms essentially mean the grant directions. These are often multi-page, sometimes upwards of 100, 200 pages. The federal will tell you the following. Again, every NOFO is going to vary, but these are the most common components in a NOFO. 1, how much money is available? You're going to want to know that. How much money is available? 1, average award size 2, and how many grants they plan to make 3. Okay, all those things are very important when you're talking about feasibility and what is your odds of getting funded, right? Especially if you're a grant writer for a firm, these things are important to tell a client when you're pitching, hey, we should apply for this grant, or hey, we shouldn't apply for this grant. This is why. Again, eligibility, first thing you got to check. Program start and end dates, as I mentioned, important for the timeline. You're going to want to see sometimes a grant is, one-time money. Sometimes it lasts for months, weeks, years. Link to the application directions to create an online account with the funder's application management system. So the NOFO often is going to show a link and you're going to have to make an account with the online portal or log into your account if you have an existing account, since nowadays grant writing is mostly done online. It's going to usually have the contact information for the funder or grant program manager and a Q&A hotline, or at least contact information. Again, number of expected awards. If it's not on there, like if any of these components aren't on there and you're interested in them, which you should be, call the funder to ask. Sometimes the grant solicitation will have a link to the frequently asked questions or FAQ, which another component that you absolutely must read, especially before you make a call or make an email to the funder. Project examples. Sometimes, again, federal grant solicitations are going to have a lot more of these components, or the longer grant program's been running, it's going to have a lot more of these project examples sometimes, or previous awardees. Required structure and sections. So in the directions, it's always going to have, the expected pages, all the different sections you need, what attachments you're going to need. It's all going to tell you there in the directions. Expected grant management and requirements. It's going to go through all that. Again, that's the assurances that when you actually get into the online application, that's what you're going to check off, but it's going to explain them initially, usually towards the end of the grant NOFO or solicitation. And if it's federal, then the directions are actually going to walk you through on the first few pages how to obtain a DUNS number in a SAM.gov. So that's why I didn't get into the nitty gritty of that here, because if you are in need of a federal grant, it's going to tell you right in the directions how to do that. And then SAM.gov and grants.gov themselves have major hotlines that are sometimes, I think 24/7, or they used to be 24/7, but definitely during expanded business hours that you can call if you need help with that. Again, I have on the bottom, Command F is your best friend. Or if you don't like paper, like pen and paper like I do, you can just download it into your Adobe Acrobat, view the PDF, and then you can, make comments in the PDF with the comment feature and the highlight feature. But I like paper and pen when I can. So grant writing versus grant management, they are two different beasts, two different worlds. If you are hired, though, by a nonprofit organization as a grant writer, you can expect to both be writing and managing grants, and sometimes researching new grant opportunities. Usually nonprofits, if they have funds available, they will hire a grant writer. And they will also be the person managing grants. You're going to be writing a lot less grants than say you were a grant writer in my old capacity, where you have multiple clients. I had upwards of 14 at one time. you're going to be managing and writing grants. But I think like that makes the most sense, you know, because you have a really intimate view and knowledge of your organization and the people in it. You have good relationships there. So I think that's an ideal position to be a grant writer in a nonprofit. Grant writing firms, you know, we typically offer grant writing services, sometimes research services, but rarely participate in direct grant management. At least our organization does not do that because it often requires intimate knowledge, again, of day-to-day operations, close coordination with the CFO and other program staff daily. Both are labor intensive. I can't say one is easier or harder than the other. They are both labor intensive, but grant management is more tracking funds and ensuring compliance, right? Keep everything organized because you might get audited. Or they can rescind the funds if they ask you questions and you don't know where the money went. Grant management can range from 1 to 5 years plus for a single grant award, and expectations listed in the NOFO are usually at the end of the NOFO for grant management, as I said on the last slide. And then lastly, clear delineation of responsibilities. I mentioned this earlier too. Who's going to be in charge of grant management when the grant is secure? Grant writers, you know, oftentimes we have to research and find grants. Sometimes, you know, our clients will already have some grants that they need our help with, but oftentimes you're going to want to supply other grants as well. And you're going to want to discuss that with your clients. Hey, who's going to be doing the grant management? But if you're at a nonprofit, it's usually you or the grant team. Ethical dilemmas. Ethical dilemmas. Now, this is a bit of a social work diversion. So for any social workers here, this is why I included this slide because I'm a social worker. Ethical dilemmas, what they are, they're predicaments which arise when social worker must choose between two viable solutions or outcomes, or is presented with a situation with competing priorities. Professional responsibilities to a non-social work organization versus maintaining the National Association of Social Worker Code of Ethics and personal moral values. So, for example, I was faced with a grant by the United States Department of Justice for ICE detainees. And as everyone knows, I'm a quite liberal person. I have a lot of undocumented immigrants in my life. And I absolutely did not feel comfortable writing the grant. So, you know, I had to weigh my professional and my personal values and kind of go to my boss with what was an awkward situation, but essentially, thankfully, we were a larger company, so I didn't have to take responsibility for writing that grant, although it was for my client, and he was understanding. But you know, sometimes you're going to, especially if you are a social worker, see grant money that just doesn't go with your beliefs or your professional and ethical standards, and I encourage you all to speak up about that. And if you're an independent grant writer, simply refuse it if you're in the position to do so. Types of grant writing employment. I just have some listed firms on here in New Jersey. There's actually not too many. It's really a niche area, although it's, you know, so many organizations, so many people, governments and all that, they need grants, but grant writing itself as a career or as a business is pretty niche. So in New Jersey, there's about 3 or 4 major companies. Grant writing, the firms, they can range from small to large, multi-state, regional, or even national, and undertake grant writers, researchers, managers, public relations, and consulting. I know like Lexipol does, you know, sometimes they teach grant writing webinars and stuff, but the larger you get, you know, these companies, hey, you know, they're making a living and it's good, but the problem is that the larger company you go with, the less personalized really your grant is going to get, because they're going to be taking information from so many other applications that they've worked on in the past, and they're just not going to get to know you as a client as personally as a smaller firm would be doing. You can be an independent or freelance grant writer, consultant. That can be lucrative depending on how much you work. In general, it's a pretty, it's a good field to be in financially. Nonprofit in-house grant writer. local government, city, county, state grant teams, depending on how big the municipality, county, city, or state obviously is. The bigger the grant team is going to be, sometimes it's one person working on managing and writing grants. And sometimes it is a whole team. Obviously on the state level, those people are not only writing and managing grants, but sometimes they're actually coming up with grant programs, like for the Department of Agriculture, whatever it may be. You could be a grant reviewer or panelist, whether you have the area of expertise in whatever the funding is for, or you're a previous grant writer. You can be a grant reviewer or panelist. You can work on grant development, which is writing the grants themselves, working with funders, foundations, state, federal government on that. Or you could do pro bono grant work. So maybe, you know, like a lawyer or attorney does pro bono work. You can also do that as a grant writer for maybe a church or your own community, commission in your community, or a nonprofit that you're on the board of or you're passionate about. Advantages and salary. Here are some just rough numbers. What you can expect, how much your worth is worth. I know us millennials want more transparency around how much people are paid, because there's been so much inequity in the world today. And I think it's important to discuss pay openly. So average salary of a grant writer in New Jersey, again, these are estimates based on my personal knowledge and things I found online. But at a firm, you can expect to make between $40,000 and $130,000 annual salary, or roughly $20 an hour for project-based work. I've seen upwards of $35, $40 an hour freelance / hourly wages. Freelance regulations on providing grant writing reimbursement through the grant is going to be dependent on funder in the state. So make sure you know that, because a lot of times people just say, oh, well, I'm going to get a percentage of the grant. That's not always legal. So make sure you know the rules in your state. Full time, if you're working as a freelance writer and you're working hard and you're a good writer, you can expect $60,000 to $200,000+ a year. There's people that make a lot of money doing that. Municipal writer, sometimes you can get hired by a municipality or a state or a city, but or a county, but about 30,000 to 120 roughly. I know there's a medium-sized 27,000 population here in New Jersey, and you know, I was friends with their grant writer at one point. They were making $52,000 a year to write and manage the town's grants. Nonprofit, you can expect 40,000 to 100,000 a year. Obviously in the Midwest and down south, that's probably going to be a lot lower, because I know salaries are lower down there. But it's probably going to be good for the area. In New Jersey, I know that there was a nonprofit that was paying their grant writers starting at 60,000. They had 7 employees. Cool tip I learned from developing relationships with my funders. FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Administration. FEMA grant administrators, you can, if you're the grant writer for a FEMA grant, you're writing the grant and you're managing it and you're administrating it, you are eligible for 10% of that grant. So a lot of times FEMA grants are like $1 million+. So like FEMA first responder grants, you know, that's a lot of money for one application. So advantages. What are the advantages you're going to have as a grant writer? You're going to be an asset to boards of directors, boards of trustees. A lot of times on boards or on a city or town or county council, you know, they look for people that know how to write grants, because then they don't have to hire them. Or, you know, a lot of times, you know, they have full-time jobs. So it's still a huge advantage. You're gonna take precedence, and if you're trying to be on a board or commission in local politics, or on a board of directors for a nonprofit or any type of board. Boards of education, you're gonna be another asset on a board of education. It's a really political world. Grant writing is one of the reasons why I do love it. Salary increase. So if you're going in as a social worker or public relations, whatever it may be, that you're applying for a job, or you get a job at an agency, organization, whatever it is, or a local government, and you have grant writing background, you can ask for a salary increase and you can take on some grant writing at that organization. You also are going to have intimate knowledge of government systems, and you're going to have relationships with funders that you can bring to the table. Grant writing significantly increases your budgeting expertise and program management skills and knowledge. I was never a big math person, but you definitely have to get well acquainted in certain ways with math, the percentages, doing fringe budgeting, fringe benefits, and all that good stuff when it comes to the budgeting section of grants. So you're going to get a little bit better with numbers, and you're definitely going to get better with program management skills and knowledge. From grant writer to executive director, I do know someone who within a very short amount of time went from the grant writer at an organization to the executive director. And I think that comes from simply, you know, as a grant manager, you're knowing, you really have really intimate knowledge about, you know, where the money in your organization is going, who your funders are, who your relationships are, who your stakeholders are, what the goals of your organization are. And that puts you in a great position to become an executive director. What is the grant cycle? Most grants are offered annually or in cycles. Some grants are offered as a part of state settlements. I mentioned this earlier. Volkswagen, they cheated on their emissions a few years back. New Jersey had sued them, and that resulted in a few $1 million, which then further resulted in some grant programs such as the It Pays to Plug In grant and Drive Green New Jersey, a bunch of different grant programs actually. But for example, It Pays to Plug In, I don't know if that was a direct result of the Volkswagen suit actually, but that's like for electric vehicle charging station, different incentive programs, but a lot of eco-friendly programs, climate justice programs, they're using that money for. Some grants are accepted on a rolling basis. So that means either a few months out of the year or all year, you can submit your grant application, and then they just award funding on an ongoing basis. Grant writers joke around. We say it takes a full year or a grant cycle to see and understand the range of applications that are released each season. Or if you're a grant manager, you're going to take a full year to understand what is due when you have to reapply, etc. After year one, you're going to be a lot more secure in your confidence and your abilities as you approach an application for the second time. Grant writing is intimidating, but it's one of those pathways that it leaves you feeling really encouraged every day, and you are always learning. And for those people that feel really empowered when they're learning on a daily basis, grant writing is definitely something that does that. Political infrastructure, grants and politics are closely intertwined. Changes in presidential administrations, they directly relate to federal and state grant application changes. So for example, I noticed when the Trump administration was in office, there's a US DOJ, Department of Justice grant called the Cops Hiring Grant, COPS program. And during the assurances at the very end, when I said you're checking off the fine print, yes, I'm going to comply, yes, yes, yes. There was actually a clause in there that said, I will comply with ICE assurances, and I can't be a sanctuary city if I get awarded this money and if I accept this money, and I have to comply with ICE. So that was really interesting to read in there. And then when the Biden administration came in, this grant was out again, and they said they paused it because they were like, oh, and I noticed they took that out. They took that clause out, which previously wasn't there either under the Obama administration. So interesting. So Biden's Build Back Better infrastructure bill, which I don't know what's going on with it at this point, Joe Manchin and all that good stuff. What it's going to do, though, we keep hearing about it in the news, but how do these funds magically get dispersed? They get dispersed through grant programs, more oftentimes than not. So essentially, they're going to go to each state. There's going to be an allotment depending on the program to each state. I'm going to go to the Department of Highways, Transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Department of Health and Human Services, Senior Services. And then the states are going to be responsible for creating a grant program in their state. And that's how this money is going to go. For example, there is a new expected FEMA grant for capital, which is actual construction, like money in hand for construction, very rare grants these days that are not for programs, for fire station reconstruction. So that was supposed to be for rebuilding firehouses and EMS buildings around the country, because they haven't had money for that in so long. They barely have money for anything, for equipment, let alone their stations. New Jersey Library Construction Bond Act, political again, that was a grant here in the state. There was like, controversy at the end of it, people complaining that, certain people did favors for certain people, that wealthy libraries still got the money to rebuild because they knew someone. Who knows what's true or not, but there's always a swarm of politics around the grant writing world. Okay, final takeaways. We're finally almost at the end here. Practice patience and persistence. Ask your organization's grant writer and manager to assist with an application. They'll probably be more than happy to have you lighten the burden. If you're interested in just like experimenting with grants, or you want to like just test the waters, do that. Be patient. Many, if not most, grant awards are thoroughly reviewed at multiple levels after algorithms often disregarding complete applications. So expect at least 3 months to 1 year for award announcements. Yes, that long. I want to say as well, if you just want to dip your toes into the grant writing world, download an application online and like just check it out, or pretend filling one out. Why not, right? Or if you're a teacher, offer grant writing, do it in school. Like teach your kids about that, especially college courses. Why are there not more grant writing, especially in social work? Shout out Rutgers, they did have a grant project in my undergrad experience, which was good. Be persistent. Grant writing is full of disappointments, but it's also full of motivating successes and wins. So work at it and don't give up. Sign up for funders newsletters so you won't miss out on grant announcements and opportunities. Once you find a funder that you want to have a relationship with, they usually have an easy way to sign up or follow them on social media. That's where they're going to oftentimes announce that there's a new grant program. Even if your application has not been selected for an award, you have developed relationships with funders, and you now have a plethora of language to use for your future application, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Grant writing term, reinvent the wheel. You don't need to do that. You can save your language, save everything in folders. It's super important to do that. It's going to save you so much time in the future. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to call or email your funder often. Ask for feedback on your application, and sometimes a funder will even review your application in advance for tips and critiques. And also, what I love to do at the end of the year, if my grant doesn't get awarded, if my application isn't awarded, sometimes, like I know FEMA fire grants, AFG does this, they will review your application with you before you submit for next year, so you can learn what to do better. And sometimes a funder will do that if they have the capacity. And that's super important to do, is to learn from your mistakes. Sometimes you can even get like the score back. Just ask. Like, there's no hurt in asking. That's what you have to do as a grant writer. Lastly, know who your competition is. Sometimes these can be key partners and not enemies. Okay, questions, ask me below. My personal email's right here. And don't be scared of grant writing. I hope that everyone got something good out of today. And I hope that we get some more grant writers out of this. So let me stop sharing my screen so I can say an official goodbye. All right. Thank you guys.